Since the pandemic, e-commerce has taken on a significant part of almost every retailer. We're seeing more and more retailers moving into store-based fulfillment in order to speed up their e-commerce delivery and reduce last-mile costs. We're pleased to be joined by Heather Lane from Ulta Beauty, which is the largest specialty beauty retailer in the United States. We're going to dig into some of the transformation projects that Ulta is going through and identify how to become much more responsive to their consumers and almost an omni-channel delivery model. So let's get into it. Heather, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much for that warm welcome, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Ulta has gone through a significant transformation, and I'm sure as a supply chain professional, you were at the forefront of this. More often than not, I'm sure it's been quite a few years that people didn't understand what you really did when you talked to them about your inventory management and your supply chain. So give me a sense, what's your role over at Ulta today?
Yeah, great question. And that's true, right? It's still, as you say, supply chain, people know what that is, but when you start getting into the nitty-gritty, there's a lot of great questions. So I am the Vice President of Supply Chain Strategy and Systems at Ulta Beauty. I've held this role for a little over a year, and I've had the honor of working through our supply chain transformation. We kicked off our transformation back in 2020, and we have a long runway ahead of us. So we're about halfway there through our transformation progress, but a lot of work has been done to this point, and I'm just proud that I get to represent the team today and talk about some of our accomplishments. I've been at Ulta almost 7 years now. Prior to that, I was at a large manufacturing company, so I've had the privilege of doing both retail and manufacturing, which gives you a really great insight into supply chain end to end.
Really interesting. We talked the largest retailer. Give us a sense of SKUs. What are we talking about here in terms of what you're managing?
Yeah, so Ulta Beauty is the nation's largest beauty retailer, and we are the premier beauty destination for cosmetics, fragrance, skincare, and hair care, and we actually offer salon services as well in most of our stores. So Ulta alone has about 1,400 stores, little over 1,400 stores across all 50 states. We offer over 25,000 products for more than 600 brands. So you can tell it's a vast array that we're managing, all those different brand partners as well as the SKU assortment. And then in 2025, at the end of this year, we'll actually be expanding into Mexico and the Middle East. So some really exciting growth opportunities coming for us. Another thing I'd love to point out is that we have the most amazing guest. We have 44 million loyalty members, of which about 95% of our sales are made up. Our guests shop both online and in our stores. Our very best loyalty guests prefer both omni-channel options. So we want to be able to offer that quickly to our guests in any way that they want to be served, so that they can access our beauty products for what works for them and their lifestyle.
Really interesting, Heather, when you're talking about not only the volume, but the way that people are buying today. What was the catalyst that you identified internally that indicated that you needed to transform your omni-channel?
We started this conversation and this process back in 2020, moving into 2021, and obviously this was in the height of COVID, right? So we were opening new distribution centers pretty quickly because we had shifted. We actually had to close down some of our stores for a period of time, as many retailers did during COVID, and we saw a flip into the e-commerce world. Traditionally at Ulta, a majority of our sales have been in our stores, and with obviously during the pandemic, a lot of that changed. So we opened up some new fulfillment methods, which I'll talk about today. But on top of that, coming out of COVID, we then are a rapidly growing, fast-paced company. So obviously as a supply chain, we want to be able to keep up with the demand of our guests and the ever-changing retail environment. So first and foremost, we saw that our DCs were very manual. The processes required a lot of labor and manual touches. And obviously in supply chain, you want as minimal touches of that product as possible from a quality perspective as well as efficiency. So that was a driving force for us. Another one was capacity. It's something we all battle with. I know talking through my peer group as well that capacity is critical. You've got to make sure you've got the right SKUs in the right place at the right time, but you don't want to grow too fast, but you also have to be able to move with the pace of the business. So for us, it was making sure that we're moving along that supply chain transformation with the enterprise strategy in mind, and then keeping up with that pace. And then, of course, there's always things that change along the way, right? New administration or COVID, right? Things that happen that kind of change your path. So we're always really agile and fluid in what that strategy looks like, knowing that we need to change with the course of the business.
Heather, was this driven out of the supply chain team, or was it driven from an organizational strategy that you were responding to? Give me a sense of where this, the driver was.
I would say both. So we go through our 3-year planning cycle every year as an enterprise, and we look at, what are those next 3 years? What do we need to strategically get ahead of? And then supply chain, IT, some of those functions that serve the overall enterprise have to react and support that. So I look at supply chain as very much a support function that's moving with the speed of the enterprise. And of course, there's a lot that we can get ahead of too. So we were looking at how do we make this much more efficient and automated? We knew that there was robotics coming out. There was ways to make our DCs efficient. We also are always thinking about speed to guest, right? How do we make our guest lives even better? And we're getting the voice of the customer from marketing. You're hearing from merchandising. We're going to be growing our brand assortment. We're going to go international, right, at some point, like I just talked about with Mexico and the Middle East. So we can't be reactive in supply chain. We've got to be proactive. So we have to understand that enterprise strategy. And then from there, we build our supply chain strategy based off of that. So that's why I say it's kind of both. You've got to understand your bigger company's vision in order to be successful in what you're trying to build within your supply chain.
Really interesting, because obviously you're responding to the demand signals and they're coming from multiple sources today. So let's get into the core of the transformation as you're describing it today. I think I read that it was a 3-tier distribution model. Can you describe the unique components, and then we can dig into each one?
We traditionally, a couple of years ago, we had 2 different distribution centers. We had our regional distribution center, which is our large distribution network, a little over 600,000 square foot building. It holds our full SKU assortment of the 25,000 SKUs I shared with you earlier. It's also an omni-channel building, so it serves both our stores with replenishment as well as our e-commerce guest. Then, of course, we had our fast fulfillment centers, and this came out of COVID, which was just e-commerce only. So those buildings, we only have one that remains today. We actually just closed one and moved to a different model, which I'll talk about here shortly, but we do have one fast fulfillment center that exists that is a smaller footprint, only about a 200,000 square foot building, and that serves our e-commerce guest. And we have that positioned in an area where we needed speed to guest and made sure that we were getting to the consumer very quickly from an e-commerce perspective. And then the third is what came out of our supply chain transformation and a strategy that we put into place about 3 years ago. So we went live with our first market fulfillment center in 2023. So we started really building that out in 2022 timeframe. And then we just opened our second market fulfillment center in last year in 2024. So it's been pretty fast paced that we now have 2 MFCs stood up. And basically what an MFC is it's a regional distribution center, but on a smaller footprint. So this is going to be about a 300,000 square foot building, and it's going to be a limited assortment. So you're not going to have all 25,000 SKUs in your building. And how we leverage that is we cross stock from our regional distribution center into our smaller market fulfillment centers to support stores. A regional distribution center is going to support 300 to 350 stores plus the e-commerce guest. A market fulfillment center is going to support 100 to 120 stores plus the e-commerce guests. Obviously, e-commerce, we can adjust our allocation up or down. We can move the demand around in the network based on where we need it to be. So that gives us that flexibility as well. But this was a new concept for us to have an omni-channel building that was a smaller footprint and then had the cross-dock capability.
Give me a sense, Heather, why going to the multi-channel, the omni-channel, as opposed to a much larger, distribution center, or a very distributed distribution centers that much smaller? You went much more on a hybrid approach. Give me a sense of how you've enabled that through technology and through your teams.
So we've got a lot of feedback from our associates in the field. I think one thing that we do are excellent at Ulta is the voice of the associate,
Mm.
especially the associates that are on the front lines in our stores and in our distribution centers. We as leaders spend a lot of time just visiting stores and visiting our distribution network because they have the best feedback to give, and they'll tell you what we need, right, to be there for our guests, to put the guest in the center of everything we do. And we kept hearing from the network that we were behind the times, right, with our automation. We have push carts in our buildings, and we have a very diverse workforce, and we actually have more women that work in our distribution centers than men. So imagine pushing around these very heavy carts throughout the building, barely being able to see over them, and trying to maneuver very quickly throughout the building. It's not the most efficient way, and then it's not the most safe or ergonomic way either. So we took all of that into account as we built out our market fulfillment centers. And we really looked at two things. We looked at capacity and how do we put as much as we can into that 300,000 square feet and also leverage the cross-dock capability. And then we looked at the safety and ergonomics for our associates and said, what do we need to drive the efficiency for them? So a good example of some technology that we put into place is our autonomous mobile robots. AMRs is what we call them, and they get a lot of selfies when you come into our buildings. They're very cool, and they move with the associate and allow the associate to be hands-free. So think about replacing a push cart with now an AMR, and that AMR has all of the different boxes on it and all the totes, and it's going to move around and do the heavy lifting for you. All you have to do as the associate is move to the AMR and pick the product into the box. It's also really important for us that we have an inclusive working environment, and like I said, very diverse workforce. We have many languages that are spoken at our buildings. Anywhere from 5 to 10 can be in one building alone, depending on where you're at in the country. The AMRs have up to 26 languages, and they communicate with you in that language. So as soon as you set up your profile in an AMR and you walk up to that AMR, you don't even have to scan your badge. It knows that it's you, and it will speak to you in your native tongue. So that was really important for us, that you could be able to interact all day with something that made you comfortable, and that you had that ease of use. I know for myself at work, I'd want it to be as efficient and easy as possible. And we got a lot of really great feedback from the associates.
Really interesting. I mean, let's get to the talent side in a second. I want to dig into the technology a little bit more, specifically Project SOAR that you guys are implementing along with your ERP. And it always seems that whenever I talk to anybody about their ERP systems, tell me when you started and how far are you in the process? Because we never talk about an end to the ERP implementations. We always seem to be in the next phase of it. So give me a sense of how SOAR as an enterprise planning is upgrading and enabling the supply chain transformation that you're talking about.
Yeah, so our Project SOAR was about a 2-year initiative. And while we still have some open issues that we're addressing with Project SOAR, the project itself has been closed out at this point. So I
Ah.
will say that's great news. The speed at which our IT partners work, our transformation office, I mean, this was a cross-functional enterprise initiative. It's not something that one team could do. So we put a lot of time and effort into building that foundation and really sunsetting SAP and bringing on the S4 system. So really different capability for us. And we had to roll it out across 1,400 stores, all of our distribution network, all 7, which means you bring down the distribution center for some time, do a cutover, and then kind of come live and have to manage through that change. And then, of course, at our corporate office as well. And accounting works quite differently than supply chain does. So it was no easy feat, but the fact that we did that in 2 years is pretty fantastic. I can only speak so highly of that team and everything they've done. And what was so important about Project SOAR is it built a foundation for us to actually implement this automation into effect. We couldn't have even had a market fulfillment center concept without Project SOAR. So cross-dock, automated cross-dock, we're building, we put, let me start over with cross-dock. Cross-dock is utilized so that we can use limited assortment buildings. So our large regional distribution centers feed our smaller distribution centers so that the stores get everything that they need for their replenishment without having to store everything in one place. So before, you would have to do a very manual process through that because you'd be dealing with an SAP building, a Manhattan building. And now having everything on that same platform really allows you to cross-dock efficiently and just ride through the building from inbound coming in, inbound receiving and automation, and then flowing right back out to outbound. So from our store's perspective, they don't know the difference if they got a pallet from a regional distribution center or a pallet from a market fulfillment center. The process for them is the same, and that's because we built that S4 foundation through Project SOAR.
So it's really seamless then to the consumer in terms of my ordering, whether I'm ordering online or through various modes. You're identifying, irrespective of where that is, the ability to serve it is through the not only the distribution centers, but the fast centers as well as the market fulfillment centers. So to the consumer, there's no obvious location for them in terms of where they're ordering it from anymore.
That's correct. Yeah, we utilize our stores, as you can imagine, as nodes of distribution, right? You had
No.
1,400 nodes to get to a consumer more quickly. But it's also that balancing act of inventory management. You want to make sure you're not consuming inventory in the store, so it's available for the guests. So we work very closely with our inventory team on that strategy, but it allows the guests to get that order more quickly if it's coming from a store right down their street than if it's a distribution center 3 hours away. So we do leverage our stores. We, of course, have BOPIS, we have curbside, we have store to door. We have all these different concepts of a way to move inventory around in our network. But we have found that the ship from store unlock is really helpful for our guests and honestly for unlocking inventory as well. You can have inventory in a store that's not moving, that's slow selling. Maybe we sell 1 or 2 units a month, and we can utilize that inventory to get to an e-commerce guest. But I can tell you for myself, because I place plenty of orders online and go to our stores as well, you don't know the difference. The package
Wow.
shows up, it's beautifully packed, you get your inventory in the same way you would from a distribution center. So that's what's most important for our guests, is that they get the inventory in the right way at the right time when they need it. And we've been able to utilize our network to do that.
Yeah, the customer experience is really important. Let's get back to the transformation. Obviously, a significant technology focus, as you're pointing out, with autonomous vehicles and the narrow aisles that you've identified within the distribution centers. There was quite a bit of effort, as you indicated before, to get the needs of the employees. Can you share how you engage your talent in the process?
One thing we do as a leadership team is that we make sure to visit our distribution networks throughout the year. We don't necessarily have a set cadence of it has to be every quarter or semi-annually or anything like that, but as leaders, we are spending quite a bit of time out on the floor in our distribution network. So we will do at holiday season what we call reindeer runs, and we're visiting our distribution network, and we're spending time, of course, going over the business update and KPIs, but we're also spending a lot of time out on the floor with the associates themselves, asking the right questions. What's your biggest pain point? If you could change one thing in this area, what would it be? What's your favorite area of the building to work in and why? Right? And they give you so much, and they give you such great insights into what they need and what those pain points are. And it almost always drives back to efficiency and an ROI. So you're kind of killing two birds with one stone. You're listening to the associate and helping them do their job better, but you're also driving the business forward. So for us, it's a big part of what we do. It's a big part of being a leader at Ulta, and I find it to be extremely rewarding. We do that in stores as well. They always have fantastic feedback of how we can be more efficient or think through our end-to-end process in a different way. And I think it's really important that we spend enough time out in the field as we do at the corporate office to try to support the business.
Interesting. Give me a sense of the customer experience. How has that changed from the feedback that you're getting from the customers right now?
So we call our customers guests,
Yeah.
and they're guests that shop at our stores or shop online. And like I shared earlier, we want to keep up, but we also want to be ahead of our guests, right? We want to know what they want before they even know they need it. And so our amazing marketing team and our consumer insights really does a great job of that for sure for us. But we want to be able to be really agile and flexible as a supply chain so that we can move quickly as things change. If you just think about the e-commerce channel in general and how much has changed over the last few years, if you're not proactive, you're going to be left behind.
Mhm.
So we're always thinking about how do we get ahead of that guest experience. NPS is really important to us. How are we serving our guest in the right way? We have an amazing guest services team that really gives us a lot of that feedback as well. So we leverage all of those data points to try to support the guest and get ahead of it for them. Another way I look at it too is that our customer is our DC network, our associates, right? I work at the corporate office, but I support our distribution centers and our store associates. So they're a customer, and if they're pushing a really heavy pick cart around all day long, and that's making them not want to work at Ulta Beauty long term. That's really important. So
Yeah.
taking their voice into account and understanding what it is that they need is extremely important. So it goes beyond the guest, but it's also the associates, and how we as leaders can guide them and manage them so that we have the best culture. We want people to work at Ulta. We want the best talent at Ulta. And in order to do that, you really have to listen, and then you have to act. You've got to actually put it into play.
No, I love the concept of the guest. Give me a sense. You're competing in a very dynamic market where you have a variety of different retailers that offer competitive products. How do you separate that experience for the consumer versus the Amazon, where I'm just clicking and buying without the relative experience and the insight that I can get from an Ulta shop?
We have 44 million loyalty members. So we've got something special at Ulta. And there's a few things there. One is when you come to our store, it's an experience. You get to touch the products, you get to try them on, you get to smell them. And we still find that most of our all of our loyalty members are going to stores and really enjoying that experience within the store itself. We even have salons in stores. So if you want to get your hair done at the same time, you can do that. It is very much an experience as you move around our stores, and the way that it's laid out and how our guests really come to play is what I say. And then we have our e-commerce guest as well. Maybe they need something quickly, or they're replenishing a product, or they just want to try something new because we're having a really exciting promotion. It's 21 Days of Beauty, or it's one of our big events. They will try some of those new things and get it to their house in 2-3 days, and they'll be able to play with that product. So we find that our guests shop in both ways, and they really do truly love that store experience, which separates us from a lot of our competitors, because beauty is, it's tangible. If you want to touch it, you want to smell it, you want to feel it, and you can't always do that with some of our competition.
No, really, you described the experience, and I think that's what a lot of individuals are looking for, considering how personal this is to the individuals in terms of what you're selling to them. So, looking forward, are there plans to further automate the fulfillment operations with robotics and AI optimization? Give me a sense of what the next step would look like.
So we've opened 2 market fulfillment centers in the last couple of years. We are retrofitting one of our large regional distribution centers this year. So we're probably about 50 to 60% of the way through. And what that includes is not only new to automation in the building. So think about capacity gains with automation. We're putting in an ASRS, a residual shuttle. We're doing automated receiving. We're driving as much automation as we can to drive efficiencies for our associates. But on top of that, we are also trying to manage the safety and ergonomics for our associates. So that's really important as we think about the future and where we go. We do have future regional distribution centers that will go through a retrofit as well. And then we're looking to expand, again, another market fulfillment center out on the West Coast within the next few years. So we've shared that publicly. We're growing our distribution network as well, and we'll be putting another MFC into place in the next few years.
Quite a bit on the regionalization, on the fulfillment model. If you look internationally, are you anticipating using the same model internationally, or are there different dynamics that you're looking at?
So we are utilizing a third party to help us manage our international expansion. Different for Mexico, as you can imagine. The Middle East are quite different economics and distribution. So for us, and our impacted supply chain at Ulta is really about moving our private label through. So we have our Ulta Beauty collection, which is extremely one of the best selling products we have with our guests. They absolutely love the Ulta Beauty collection, and it recently got a revamp almost a year ago, and it's just everything in the line's fantastic. So we want that to be obviously offered in the Middle East as we build that brand awareness, and then offered in Mexico as well. So we'll be utilizing our distribution network to move that product through, but everything else will utilize a third party to help us manage the inventory.
Looking back, there were some lessons learned. What can we learn from some of the experiences that you went through? What would you have done differently? What would you have done faster, perhaps?
I think first and foremost, if you're listening to this or watching this and you're a leader in this space, don't get too set on one strategy. The strategy, the timelines, what you need, what the business needs changes all the time. So while you have a strategy in place, and I'm going to do this in Q1 of 2025 and this in 2026, that's great, because you need that strategy and you need it on paper, but you've got to be able to be agile and move quickly as things change, because I promise you they will. So that's first and foremost. Secondarily, like I talked about earlier, don't work in a silo and assume you know what the operations needs. Really spend the time with the associates and getting that voice of the associate. Truly, what are those pain points? What are those things that they're asking for that maybe you hadn't even thought of? Because then that will drive what automation works for that building. And then always think about capacity. How can we utilize those four walls of the building to get as much space as we can and enough capacity that you're supporting the growth of your business as well? You don't want to grow too big, too fast, but you also don't want to be the reason why you can't expand. So finding that happy medium is really important.
A really interesting point there that you're indicating that you perhaps didn't have the full design when you started this. So as you developed it, what was your North Star, saying, all right, this is where we need to go. We're not really quite sure about all the particulars, but this is where we want to go. What's the North Star for Ulta?
Oh, that's such a good question. For us, I think it's capacity being really, really important. And that means so many things in so many ways. Your e-commerce guest, being able to serve them quickly, and making sure that we've got the SKUs in the right places. Our store growth continues. We've got 1,400 stores now, and we've shared we're going to grow that above 1,600 stores. So that is important, because how you store product for e-commerce for stores is quite different, and you've got to be able to manage both of those channels. So capacity is always very top of mind, as well as, like I shared, the right thing to do for our guests and our associates. That's beyond automation, beyond supply chain. That's just what we do at Ulta Beauty. The decisions we make are centered around the guest and the associate. So if you do that and you make that your center and your North Star, you're always going to make the right decision. So that is, for me, what's really important. And then, of course, driving the capacity and the efficiencies comes with that. I will say, too, something that's unique about Ulta, which I share with many of my peers, we share inventory for both e-commerce and our stores.
Yeah.
So like I shared, most of our buildings except one are omni-channel. So we're shipping out orders to our e-commerce guests directly, and then we're also replenishing our stores. And that inventory is all shared. That has a lot of gains when you do that, because you can obviously flex and move your inventory as needed based on demand. But it's also difficult to manage, because now you've got to be really good at those ups and downs and puts and takes, and what do I hold back and what do I push forward. So that is, I think, a key strategy for us that works really well, but it doesn't come without its limitations and without some of its challenges.
Yeah, that really a great example of supply chain transformation on technology and giving you visibility, but also leveraging the talent that you have there and emphasizing scale and a much more forward-thinking approach. Heather, really great information. We'll be watching Ulta as you go through the transformation, and I hope to be one of your guests when I go in there and get a little bit of help for myself as well.
We would love to have you in our stores anytime, and use our app, use our website, however you like to shop. But our guests are men and women, very diverse. So you are more than welcome to join Ulta at any time.
Wonderful, Heather. Thanks again.
Thank you.